Hi Hiro.
How are you, Filip?
I'm good. I have several questions for you.
Okay.
I travel a lot and many hosting companies very often ask me about specific in some markets. And many of them asks about specific in Japan.
Right.
Couldn't you explain, as you are like one of the biggest or maybe biggest player in Japan, couldn't you explain a little bit some specific running hosting in Japan?
Sure. Why don't I start by explaining a little bit about ourselves. GMO Internet Group comprises of 106 companies, 9 of which are listed on the stock exchange. We have about 5,500 staff in 22 countries and 61 locations, and we do about $1.4 billion in revenue and about $160 million in profit. We are number one in pretty much everything we do in the infrastructure business, such as domains, where we have 90% market share. Hosting, we have about 55% market share. E-commerce solutions, payment solutions, ISPs, and so forth. When it comes to hosting, I think one of the very big differences in a Japanese market as compared to other markets is that advertising is very unique. Whereas you see a lot of domain advertising in other countries, such as visit my website, www.blah blah blah whatever. In Japan, it's usually search for this keyword. So it's a very different experience when it comes to advertising. And that's, I think, a very unique thing to Japan.
So all domains are keyword based in Japan.
Keywords are very important. Not only keywords, but I think it's the ads that are very different, how people market their products. They don't say, come to our website. They say, search these terms on Google. So that's a very different way of advertising.
And what I saw in Japan market that all like local people speaks only Japanese. So
Yes.
I think that support will be 99% Japanese.
Yes, it absolutely has to be. So language barrier might be another issue. Although people do understand English, they prefer Japanese. And it is very easy to spot a translation that is done automatically. You can tell when you go to a website if it's been translated automatically, say by Google Translate, or if it's done by an actual Japanese person. If so much as the website looks funny or looks as though it doesn't have the right sort of translation, people will have fears and doubts about that website. So having a perfectly translated Japanese website is key. And also when it comes to hosting, speed is also a very important factor. We put a lot of effort, a lot of resources in making sure our servers that are hosted in Japan have absolutely no latency and are at its fastest pace. Again, because speed is, internet is so prevalent in Japan and ubiquitous. People are used to getting high-speed internet.
Or is it enough to have one data center in Japan, for example, just renting servers in one place, or we need to like put several servers, for example, in north and south?
Having one is all right. DNS could solve the other issues. So I think having one location is all right.
Okay, next question is about pricing in Japan.
Yes.
For example, what is about if you compare to Japan, to for example, to US market or to Europe market, is hosting price huge in Japan, or it's like?
Right. Pricing is also competitive. It depends on what sort of level of service you're looking for and also what level of servers you're looking for. But pricing is very competitive in Japan. Again, because there are a lot of players in this area and we try to provide the best service at the best price, which allows our customers to get a good product at a reasonable price.
Just if we compare just to the US price, price in Japan is a little bit like high and market average, or it's like lower if we compare just with the like world pricing?
It's very difficult to say because
different types of
again,
services.
right? It depends, but I would say it's about the same.
About the same.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is about like customer loyalty? As I know, in Japan, people like big brands and like they're going with big brands.
Right.
And it's very complicated to new customers, to new hosting companies to get customers.
Right.
Is it like that? Yes.
It depends on the customer as well, the demographics of the customers. If we're talking about individuals or companies or very tech-savvy people or not, I think it varies. But if there are good services that you can provide that are better than existing services, there are people who will adopt these new things. I think a good example might be technology. There's a lot of technology that's been involved around the world. Japan used to be on the forefront in a lot of things. We're no longer the forefront. There are a lot of American companies, such as when we talk about phones, iPhones, smartphones, we don't make a lot of smartphones anymore. But back before the smartphone area, a lot of people use Japanese phones. So people do adopt new technology very quickly if it makes sense for them and if it's better for them.
And about payment gateways in Japan, as I know, you run your own payment gateway, Epsilon, and it's also aggregator. As I understood, Japanese people do not prefer to pay PayPal or Visa or MasterCard.
Right. So a lot of people still, Japan is a very cash-centered society. Cash is still about 50%, I think accounts for about 50% of transactions. People do carry around cash a lot, as opposed to credit cards and mobile payments. Mobile payments, speaking of which, are not big yet, but credit cards are big. A lot of people have credit cards, but there is still fear of using credit card online out of fear that the information may be stolen or may be used in a bad way. So people do prefer cash or cash on delivery or postal payments or payments at what we call convenience stores, which are little shops that you can find every block, literally. So there are different ways of paying in Japan that allows people to use cash but substitute services like PayPal.
And what about investing in domains? For example, in US or Europe, where market is very developed, people buy many domains. And for example, hosting company can have, for example, 10,000 hosting provider, 10,000 shared hosting, and 100,000 domains. For example, if you go to the young markets like Brazil or Argentina, typically shared hosting will have the same amount of shared hosting and the same amount of domains, because people do not buy domains without hosting.
Right.
So what is about Japan? Does people invest in domains, and how much domains they buy?
People are starting to pick up on domains. It was not a big thing, to be honest, before. When you look at the country, the size of the country, we're the third biggest economy in the world. We have 120 million people in our country, but the per population, domain ownership per population is way below that of, let's say, the Netherlands or Germany or UK or most countries. That is starting to change because people are starting to understand the value of domains which are addresses on the internet. So I think that notion of domains and investing in domains is starting to change.
And let's talk also about .shop. So as you are CEO of .shop, it's a good opportunity for me to ask you several questions. There are many TLDs over the world, and as we see .com, .net, .biz, many of them losing their primary focus. For example, .com was for companies, but also many individuals run .com.
Right.
.biz is like their other segment. .net is for net companies, but typically we see that .info, .pro takes everybody, and they lose their primary focus. So does .shop has their own focus, his own focus?
Absolutely. So it's a domain for commerce. Whether it's e-commerce or offline commerce, it is a domain for commerce. It's very simple, it's intuitive, and we believe it's the best option for anyone doing anything commerce, because any domain name with a .shop TLD at the end, extension at the end, lets people know that it's a shop that sells whatever that domain name is. If it's a keyword, let's say champagne versus champagne.com. If it's champagne.com, it may be a website about the Champagne Committee, about the Champagne region, about the Champagne itself. It might be a website that sells champagne, but you cannot tell just by looking at the domain name. If it's .shop, you know that it's a website that sells champagne. I think that's a very strong, it's call to action to consumers, and it saves one extra click because consumers know if they're looking for a place to shop, they know just by looking at the domain name what sort of website it is.
And just a question, like every big brand, I don't know, we can take Porsche, we can take, I don't know, any type of brands. They, of course, they have many websites, like Porsche Global, Porsche DE, and something. So typically they would have like Porsche.shop to sell all accessories, all, I don't know, tires. So something like that.
Exactly, right. So you would want to differentiate your website, your corporate website versus your shopping website. If you want to sell goods directly online to your customers, you don't want IR information, you don't want news, you don't want corporate information on a website where people are buying products. You want those things to be completely separate. And to separate these websites, it makes perfect sense to use a .shop domain name because, again, customers who see the domain name, if it's Porsche, Porsche.shop, knows exactly that website sells something that's made out of Porsche or made by Porsche, whether it's cars itself, accessories, whatever it is.
And what also maybe a last question about big brands. So
yes,
Japan, as you said, third market in the world, and there are a lot of world brands like Wix, I don't know, GoDaddy, I don't know, Hosting Europe, and there are like many international brands coming to Japan. And if we take like hosting industry, it's like hosting industry, they just lose their positions and providing market for these global brands, or Japanese hosting still like in Japanese hands?
Not necessarily, I think. We do have 55% market share, but we've been in this industry for a long time. We are at the forefront, but still we only have 55%, which means there's still a lot of market that's owned by other players, not necessarily just by Japanese players. When you look at Google, for instance, or Amazon, they are doing very, very well in Japan. So you don't have to be a Japanese company to succeed in Japan. When you look at cars, Toyota, Nissan, Honda, these are wonderful companies. They make great cars. But Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Porsche, these cars are very, very popular in Japan as well. This is obviously a very different market and different industry, but my point is you don't have to be a Japanese company to succeed in Japan. If the product is good, and if it's priced correctly, and if it's localized correctly, which is a very, very important part, your products will do very well in Japan.
And last question, just if I would like to run business in Japan and like have significant sales in Japan, I need to have like local presence. For example, if you take PayPal is a Russian office run whole Europe and Africa countries.
Right.
They have about 25 people, as I know.
Okay.
And they have presence only, of course, in UK, of course, in Germany, in Russia, but whole Europe and whole Africa, no offices, maybe like several presence.
Okay.
But with Japan, it will be like unable to run like that. So
we
should have local presence. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's key. Again, because localization is very, very important for the Japanese market. Having the right websites in the right language, with the right words, the right text, the right features, all those things are very, very important in succeeding in Japan. Absolutely.
So thank you, Hiro.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Arigatou.
You're welcome.